Awesome. So good morning. And my name is Deidre Welcome. I serve on the board of directors for TOC as the Chief Content Officer. So welcome to our Discover New Generation Learning Technologies that help turn SMEs into creators. Um, Second of all, I introduce myself first. Second of all, Happy New Year. Welcome to our first TOC event of 2024. We are really, really excited to have you join us for an impactful and powerful new year. We're just going to continue on from where we left off in 2023. So, as always, we like to start our programs with a quick overview of TOC. So, this is why we exist for you. Our goal is to provide you with opportunities to network and create a federal training or government learning community. We feel that we are uniquely positioned to address the specific learning and development needs of government training leaders and practitioners because of our community. We really pride ourselves in the community that we build within TLC, and it has continued for years. We also provide opportunities to build and sharpen your skills with a number of different learning experiences. One of the things that we're keenly focused on this year is providing you with some skill building events and activities, such as the L&D Pro Academy, which some of you are participating in, learning circles, which we just started this year, the annual institute, which is our premier event that we always look forward to every year. And then the 4 Ds, one of which the first D is discover, which is what today is focused on. Discover is when we explore trending topics like today's webinar. Discuss, which is where we discuss best practices, techniques, strategies from interactive strategies, and we have interactive activities and engaging discussions like the one we're doing on the 23rd. So make sure you sign up for that one. And where we're going to explore some modern learning technologies. And then we also, the last 2 Ds is the deep dive. And this is where we have targeted workshops like the one we're having on February 6th. So check out our website, stay connected with us on LinkedIn so you can stay informed of what we have going on. Lots of opportunities for you to build and connect with TOC. And then we also, part of our mission is we want to add to your toolkit with some learning resources. So our resources are products, services, and most importantly, what I've already mentioned is our supportive and experienced community. So please take advantage and find ways to connect and get involved. Also, this is our vision. This is our vision. And we really want to be your go to community for all things learning and development. So, this is our vision. It's also located on our website. And lastly, I want to remind you please do not forget to save the date. April 28th through May 1st is our TOC Annual Institute, which will be in Philadelphia this year. Our theme for the year is Feel the Love in the City of Brotherly Love. And the tracks are going to be leadership development, optimization of learning and development roles, value, and engaging technologies. So notice the acronym LOVE. We are going to play that up and look forward to you participating and attending this year's annual institute. All right. So here's what you came here for. I am really excited about this because, as you know, AI is really, really, top of mind for us, especially in the learning and development community. So let me introduce our speaker or our facilitator for today, because we try to facilitate learning experiences versus just presenting information. So Dr. Brett Christie, since 2020, Dr. Christie has served as Vice President for Educational Innovation and Inclusivity at Alchemy, which is a leading ed tech firm. That is a tongue twister. Ed tech firm that empowers educators to combine the science and magic of teaching effectively. His career in higher education spans over 3 decades, including 25 years in the California State University system, where he played a pivotal role in student equity and success initiatives at both campus and system levels. His experience includes over 15 years of teaching in educational technology, teacher education, and UDL accessibility and K-12 partnerships. So Brett has also held leadership positions in several state and federal projects focused on professional development for inclusive teaching methods, accessibility, UDL, assessment, technology integration, and online effectiveness. More recently, he has turned to generative AI and has a potential to create effective and personalized learning experiences. Brett's expertise has been recognized through presentations and consultations across North America, South America, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. So, this is our international facilitator for today, Dr. Brett Christie. And I am turning it over to you, Brett.
Thanks so much, Deidre, and thank you for the kind introduction there. And I'll fill in a little bit. It's always nice to just personalize that somewhat and tell you, sort of where I stand and what has the most value to me in what I do. And the term inclusivity is in my title, and I hold that firmly, and I ensure that that's there with me because I've been on that path for over 20 years now through Universal Design for Learning and leading efforts there. And I've worked on Universal Design for Learning and taking it from where it originally was focused on accessibility to really making sure that it's a pathway to ensure the greatest number and diversity of students succeed, period, bottom line. That's been my mission. And in working in the Cal State system, that was such a big part of equity and access. So that always was a great role to play. And not to get into backstory too much, but in 2019, I decided to retire out from that position and try something different, sort of a second career path. And that's where I landed with Alchemy. In having conversations with leadership at Alchemy, there was just such a blend of vision and purpose and excitement about possibilities that I took the leap. And I've been there 3.5 years now and loving the ride. And I get to do a lot of innovating around, teaching practices, learning practices. And with GenAI, of course, there's a lot of possibilities that came very quickly just over a year ago. And my jumping into that journey was about a year ago from this month, is deciding, okay, I'm going to sit down and go through some training videos and figure out what this is about. What is an LLM? What's behind that? What does that then enable? What are the experiences like on the user side? And that was early on with ChatGPT and just exploring it. And I decided to spend 6 to 9 months on this crazy ride of just trying to get up to the top of the hill of everything that was happening with AI. And I completely understand how many people are just overwhelmed by it and the pace of it. There was so much. But in hanging in there, I feel like, okay, that was a great thing, even though it was exhausting, continually exhausting. I could not spend a waking moment not thinking about what was coming out, what was being announced, what was new, what was in the news, all of that. So all of that to say that I've tried to get a really good handle on it and how it can be used most effectively for teaching and learning. Currently, it'll continue to evolve, but in doing so, I've been able to prop up some really good examples that have gotten good results. And so I'll be sharing a lot of those today, but also hearing from you. So I've propped up moments where I'll be asking you about your journey related to GenAI and how it relates to your roles. A lot of what I present today will be related to learning design, instructors, learning designers, and student experiences. And it'll be in higher ed traditional type environments, but you can all certainly change the context a little bit of the dialogue I'm using and of the prompts that I'll be sharing. And I'll be sharing a lot of prompts with you. You'll have access through the slide set that I imagine will be circulated. I already submitted that, so don't feel like you've missed anything or I've gone too fast on one slide. You'll be able to capture all of it and go back through anything that was useful. So it's not just the slides, but I'll be taking you to the Chat GPT logs that you'll have access to, where you can see the conversations I've had and the resulting resources that have come from that. Okay, so give me a moment here to go to share screen on my side, and then I'll just reorient a couple of my windows and away we'll go. And I didn't share as part of my background, I'm also a first generation college student. So knowing the struggles that some students go through, some learners go through, being first generation in their family, not having a template, not having ideal support, that's something that has definitely resonated with me as well. All right. So let's dive in. Let's discover together related to GenAI. And this is going to be primarily through the lens of Chat GPT, which is what about 80% of usage or so is out there. And so that'll be the common grounding we'll use as far as the technology. I'll also talk about some of the plugins and other AI technologies that are there toward the end when we talk about multimedia development and things like that. So these are the main areas I'll focus on. So just to check in regarding AI and looking at critical workload relief. To me, that's one of the exciting things, is not just that this is something that can be exciting and new and creates new possibilities, but also how it can provide some workload relief. Now, ironically, a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed by it because there is that learning curve. But I've got some ideas, and we at Alchemy have some ideas for how that learning curve can actually be shortened very significantly. And I'll get to that toward the end as well. How to enable syllabus enhancements. I've been on a syllabus campaign or rampage, depending on the moment, for about 20 years now, and seeing so many more possibilities just through the syllabus, how that can be done more effectively. So I'll give a few examples there. You can think of the syllabus, or you can think of the course landing page or the welcome module, things like that as we go through those examples. Learning outcomes, I still see those written out ineffectively and then not aligned to experiences. So we'll look at possibilities there. We'll look a little bit at course AI policies and guidelines and an AI assessment scale that's new that I've adopted. A little bit on module lesson design, and we'll talk about what's possible on full scale course design with AI. Even back in March, there were companies that were trying to set up tools where you could put in a topic and it would create a whole course. Well, I explored those, obviously, very excited and curious, and it was basically a mishmash, and they've gotten better, but there's still definitely caution there about that. And then you can see a few things at the end that we'll briefly explore, and I just want to get us to dive in here. So let's start with a poll. I want to get a little bit information about your feeling, and this is anonymous, but how confident do you feel with current GenAI tools? Again, I think ChatGPT could be Bing, could be Gemini with what's out so far, but some of those main generative AI tools. We'll go ahead and let that run for a moment here. And let's confirm that that's launched. I'm seeing 0 of 1 answer. Could be my role type. I'm not seeing the responses.
Yes, we currently have 77% have participated.
Great. And whenever you feel like that's close enough on percentage, go ahead and push the results, please.
All righty. Hold on just one moment. Okay. And hopefully, there we go. Sharing results now.
Great. Okay. So we're definitely tipped toward the lower end, if you will, as far as competency or experience with, comfort level, et cetera. That's great. There's a lot of opportunity here. And so I will be sharing a lot of things here that you can adopt easily, and you can play around with those and get, start moving up your scale, if you will, to the very competent, frequent user. And sometimes when people aren't at the A or B, the very competent or very competent, it's, again, time. They haven't had time to absorb it, to think about it, to know how it can play a role in the different things they do. So hopefully today is going to edge everybody up the scale a little bit. And let's go to one other exercise here. Which areas of course design are most challenging or time consuming? If you do happen to be on a mobile device, you can grab the QR code or use the QR code, but I'm going to put the link in the chat for you. I'm going to let that sit there for just a moment, and then we'll all gather together in the answer garden. And then we'll debrief based on your responses. So I've gone out to my browser. You should be seeing my page. And what I'm going to do is minimize the screen. The only answer garden is free, but the only thing is you'll see ads based on recent things that you've viewed. So I've recently booked a flight on Alaska Airlines. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize those, and I'm going to hit refresh and just put in 1 or 2 word answers here, very brief. Front end analysis, great. We'll talk a little bit more about that front end analysis. And answer garden will refresh automatically about every 30 seconds. I usually go a little more quickly than that. Content creation, yeah, we'll talk about that. And then also, checking content for accuracy, looking out for hallucinations. You've heard that term, I'm sure. Learning objectives, we'll look at that. Redesign and revision ideas. Yeah, I didn't specifically look at it as a lens of redesign, but you'll see a lot of the examples today and how they can be applied to a redesign. Needs assessment. Yeah, and I'll need to know a little bit more about needs assessment. So is it assessing the needs of the learner, assessing the needs of the instructor? Learning objectives jumping out front more. Let me look in the back at some of the smaller comments. Adding interactives, great. Yeah, and we'll look at some of those leading edge potential solutions that are out there. I have a few that I'll talk about today. Interactivity, so is that getting more interactivity into the course? And using it for research and creating content for sure. Yeah, and research, just the caveat again, that's one of the weak areas I've seen with ChatGPT is on research. You have to be careful with it, that hallucination. If you're asking it to do research for you, to find resources, find articles for you, then it can give you a lot of articles that don't exist. So you need to check those before simply putting them into your course. So, you obviously want to screen those and evaluate those, but you don't want to just take that as a set list. Using GenAI or other tools like Scite, S-C-I-T-E, you can actually have it analyze data. So if you're talking about research for data analysis, that can be done really effectively. And so scholarship and research and scholarship is an area that I'm definitely exploring with GenAI, and I'll touch upon that briefly today, but hadn't planned on going too deeply. Okay, one last peek here, see if anything else jumps out that's new. Time commitment, that's an interesting one. So we're looking at how to save time heavily in Alchemy. We're looking at how to really leverage GenAI, not just what exists out there, but some things that we're developing. Let's see, AI for data analysis, Scite, S-C-I-T-E. Let me put it in chat. And I believe it's .ai for the URL. And I think I have that in one of the last slides here. Okay, so let's jump away from Answer Garden. And yeah, this is a free tool that's great for just doing a pulse check with your audiences. Just putting a prompt out there and having them put in very succinct responses. Okay, so now let's jump back into some context. So one of the beautiful things that I see about AI is critical workload relief. Once people can get comfortable with it and see what it can do, then they can start thinking about their workflows and where it can provide some workload relief. We've been doing research, and I just have 2 quick slides on this. We've been doing research since September of 2022, and this is with 530 faculty from all institution types. They told us about their workload and the time that they spent planning and preparing for their courses. And you can see on the left, for a first-time course, they were spending about 38 hours before the semester. And then you can see during the semester, they were spending about 7 hours per course. And with my experience in the Cal State system, instructors typically teach 4 course loads. for a typical instructor role. So you're looking at 28 hours per week just on prep and maintenance of their course. That doesn't account for teaching, communications, advising, committees, service, research, scholarship, all of those things. So no surprise, 55% of faculty said they just don't have time to teach effectively. And in that, again, in that example of my system, Cal State system, teaching is the #1 priority. It's not an R1. So that's huge. And this was, again, across all university types and all instructor role types. And then the other thing that we looked at that was interesting is in the survey, we also asked these instructors, what are the most important things for the student experience? They gave us some amazing responses. These are just about what you would want to have. I think there could have been more related to inclusivity, but again, that's where I stand and always looking for that. They did say accessibility, that's great. But this is a great snapshot of the types of things that students should be experiencing. So it's great that they were able to respond that way. But in the same survey, in a different location, we asked them, how do you spend time preparing for your courses? It's creating content, creating assessments, lecture prep, keeping content fresh and updated, and curating. And that comes from sort of the comfort of the instructor often is they are content experts. They've got doctorates in most cases in their content area of expertise and their research. They haven't been taught how to teach. And so there's this friction or gap you can see between what they know could be done, but where they spend their time and maybe that comfort zone. So we've been using AI and some of our tools to try and get people to be able to do the things on the right more effectively. Okay, now basics of using ChatGPT. What I like to do is approach ChatGPT as a creative companion. And now let me get the chat box back up here so I don't miss any comments. There we go. Oh, yeah, Lauren, for when you set up an answer garden, you can have it limit people to 20 characters or 40 characters. And it's by design because if you let people put sentences in, then you don't really get a tag cloud of repeated themes as much. So yeah, sorry, I missed that. Okay, so creative companion is the term that I've been using throughout because I like that because it gets people to maybe think of GenAI or ChatGPT in a more friendly way, in a more useful way, that it's working alongside them. And you'll see how I interact with ChatGPT in my prompts. I talk to it. I say positive things to it. I do that because, you know, what I'm putting into ChatGPT is going into the LLM in a sense. And whenever we can put positive out there in the world, I just think we need to do it. So I praise it, I talk nicely to it, but I'm still telling it what to do. It's still working for me in a good way. So these are the types of things that you can think about with ChatGPT, where it can help you to create, build, you know, just start scaffolding things. It can role play or play a persona. You can have it respond in the voice of an expert or a certain historical character. You can tell it to take a concept and scale it up, or if you will, scale it down or dumb it down. I don't like to use that term. You can have it actually help with accessibility efforts. So yeah, Ava, I like how you do that as well. And I see the other heart reactions on there. I just think there's so much toxicity out there in life and what we hear and see and read sometimes that this is an opportunity for us to just kind of hopefully influence AI. So some of you may have seen these very complicated acronyms for these prompting frameworks. I've tried to simplify it because I think simpler is better. So you want to think of the role that you're asking ChatGPT to play. And so I've given some role types there in that first column, and there's many more. You want to think of the task and be specific about that task, but also as you talk about the task, you have requirements. So what do you want them to include or exclude? The length, the number of words, all of those different things. And then what is the output type? Is it going to be text? If you have ChatGPT Plus, you can do visuals. Could it be data? Could it be a table or a spreadsheet? Some people are doing it for code, obviously. So I just look at these 4 things, and then down at the bottom, what I've been trying to do that I think has been unique is applying elements of learning science, and I'll show a few examples along the way, is if you give it these broad statements, you're going to get some results that aren't always the best methods or the best examples. But if you know how to put in some elements of learning science as parameters, then you're going to get better results, much better results that are going to align with good design and good delivery of learning experiences. So you'll see those along the way, and I'll point them out. And then I, again, apply personal touches. I know you can do this, or if you say, take a moment to think it over, it will actually give some stronger results. There's some evidence on that, some research that's been done. I should have given you a slide toward the end of great people to follow in this area. I do that sometimes. Okay, so any questions or comments about the framework? I've seen some that are, acronyms of 8 characters of these 8 stages. And that can be useful, but I think that can be overwhelming because, again, think of it as your creative companion, and just knowing enough of these, you can have an effective conversation with ChatGPT without having it to be so formulaic and rigid. So, okay, great. So let's go on to seeing some of this in action. So let's start with the syllabus, because that's the first experience that most students will have with a course, is that syllabus that's been distributed to them, hopefully before the course starts, so they can start thinking, start getting excited about it. And hopefully it's done in a way that's not just a formality, it's not sort of contract or transactional oriented. So with the syllabus description, course descriptions to me have always been so ineffective, and they tell nothing about the course. And when they're in a course catalog, of course, they're meant to be very succinct and very limited, because it gives the instructor some academic freedom to build around that. But often course descriptions only tell you how biology 101 is different from biology 102. It doesn't tell you what biology 1 is going to enable you to experience, to learn, and why it can be so exciting. So for this, I happened to snoop around. I snooped around the UMGC catalog and looked at different course descriptions, which actually I was impressed by, much better than most that I've seen out there. So here's an example of one that's effective and accurate for what it's doing in a catalog to sort of stand up with the other biology courses that are in the order. But if you can just do a simple prompt in ChatGPT, you can then create your own course description. This is a catalog description. I want instructors to think about a course description that tells more about what students are going to experience and gets them excited and motivated before day one. So let's look at a ChatGPT log. So when you're working in ChatGPT, you can actually, and I'll go over to another tab here, which is the live view. This button icon on the top right, the share icon, this is where you can grab a link to enable other people to access the log of your GPT experience, your conversation in ChatGPT. So I'll be showing that a couple different ways, and I think that'll become familiar to you. So here's the prompt that I have, and it's back on the slide as well for you. These are all captured in the slides as well. So I'm teaching a course called Biology 328. The course description in the catalog simply says, and you can see what's in quotes there, this is such an interesting course, so I'd like you to propose a course description that would cause a great deal of interest in when students read it. What you create should be approximately 100 words. Go. So here's then the result. And again, in live, I'll do some live ones in just a bit, but this happens in a matter of seconds. This is actually a pretty basic one. So in a matter of 5 to 10 seconds, you've got this proposed course description that you can put into an email to students, that you can put into the syllabus, that you can put into the course landing or welcome page, the welcome module, whatever you want to do to place it. And then I said, great, now I'd like you to create a video script version that I could use for a 60-second welcome video, because that helps to humanize the course for students. It gets them a sense of who the instructor is, and you stating the importance and what the experience should be like, and your passion. So here it did, and it does this really well. It creates these welcome video scripts or other video scripts really well. If you just give it the context and the time limit, it knows how to do word count according to time in videos. So it'll actually, script this as if you're going to have somebody helping you, cut to various shots, DNA helix, a debate in the classroom, etc. It got a little bit too fancy. It did it really well as far as the context, what's in quotes. But as far as the production, it got a little bit too fancy. So here at the end of this 60-second script, I decided to say, I really like the context, but let's make it a bit simpler in terms of videography and video editing required, because no instructor is going to do what was in that last one as far as all of those fancy editing tricks and splices and, you know, extra graphics and things like that. So here is a more typical scenario where the instructor might be in their office, they're smiling, they're saying hello and welcome to Biology 328. It could cut to them at their desk. The instructor might have a poster in their office that they gesture toward related to a topic. These could also be things that they do in Zoom and record themselves with different slides that come through in Zoom. So different ways they could do this. We'll talk about some GenAI methods here in a little bit. HeyGen is one of those that we'll talk about. In terms of style and voice when prompting for a script, you know, I haven't had to do much, and that's a great question. You know, when ChatGPT was coming out, so many people were focusing on, oh, you have to tell it what tone. And in some instances, yes, you do want to carefully tell it what tone to use, but I have found it will sort of mirror the tone that I use with it, and that's why I like to be positive and you know, somewhat informal, if you will, at times with ChatGPT. So I would say, you know, if you really want to talk about the voice or tone, then tell it, and it'll definitely follow that guidance. But I've kind of backed off of not having to really do that much. Also, as it's given me this script, I can copy and paste that and then put it into my own document, and then I can do some simple editing. And most times you're going to want to do a little bit of editing of the ChatGPT output. It's going to get you to 80–90% of what you need pretty quickly, but you're going to know the honing in of that voice, the affect that you want, the accuracy. You're going to see, if you haven't already, that it uses certain words quite a bit. Delve and dive and other D words. It really likes to use those repetitively. And so you can simply substitute a different word because you definitely don't want students getting the same thing. And you definitely don't want students getting the sense that you're not the voice within what's produced. Again, you're using this as your creative companion. You're not having to do everything for you and speak for you. So it's been using crucial. Okay, yeah. You'll see, and even in my examples, and I always bring that up because it is important to note, and that's where you can just use your own filter to do quick edits. Okay, so back to the slide then, and that's a simple example of a catalog description. I have another example I've been using for a couple of years, so pre-GenAI and all of this, but it's a course called Sex, Death, and Evolution. And the catalog description for that is so dull when that course, obviously, wow, it's Game of Thrones type stuff that comes to mind when you think of that title. So I've created some variations of that catalog description, and it's obviously a really exciting course and possibilities. But I tried to focus more on some of the ones here today that are maybe more traditional. So here's another catalog description. Again, effective, serves its purpose in the catalog, but it doesn't get anybody's juices flowing as far as what they're going to experience. So here's another example. I'm not going to go into ChatGPT, but in the slide, again, you have access to the ChatGPT log where you can go and look at the process I used and what the output was from ChatGPT. And I bolded some of the words here because you can see that it's starting to put in action terms and verbs and things like that to really get students thinking. And let me get chat back up here real quick. Okay, so now let's talk about learning outcomes, and that did come up in the answer garden, so I was glad to see that. And that's another one where most instructors, they're not assessment experts. Brilliant people, I'm not criticizing, but they're not assessment experts, instructors, and most people aren't. So with learning outcomes, people will struggle, and the learning outcomes, they know that the instructor knows the intention, they know what they want students to get out of a course, but it's not always effectively articulated. And if the outcomes aren't effectively articulated, then there's certainly not going to be alignment of those outcomes effectively to the assignments and the assessments and the activities and the content. So let's look at a process for improving the outcomes, but then being able to leverage those even more effectively through ChatGPT. So I just picked 5 very broad outcome statements that I found out there. And some of you might know the SMART acronym for developing strong outcomes, that they should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. I don't use that full acronym when I'm working with ChatGPT, but I do use a couple of those elements. And so I'll show those to you in a moment. But these are learning objectives that are not measurable. What does it mean to learn something? What does it mean to understand something or know something or become familiar? Apply can be a measurable outcome, but the statement is too broad. Apply one of the many theories. It's not saying to what level, to what degree, and what is the product type or the measurable. So these are extremely vague, and so an instructor would have a hard time measuring these effectively. Students would have a hard time knowing what's expected of them. And so there's that gap there, and there can be the misunderstandings, and then you get these grade disputes and all sorts of things. If you get students who aren't empowered knowing how to learn themselves, then they're going to struggle in meeting the goals of the instructor. So here's a ChatGPT prompt that I created. You are an educational assessment expert. I'm going to give you some learning objectives that I'm working on, but could use your help to ensure that they are specific and measurable. So I did use those two terms so that students know what's expected, and so I can best align my content, activities, and assessments. So I'm giving it also the long-term goal there. I'm propping that up. So here's a few examples that I would like you to improve. So I pasted, and now just so you're familiar with this ChatGPT prompt, you see the language in those first 4 lines. When you see brackets, that's where you would be able to take that prompt I've created and just put in your context, and it'll work for you the same way that I'm demonstrating. And hopefully that's making sense. So let me go to the next page, and I put these into a slide. So now you can see the same objectives and now written to a level where they are actually specific and measurable. Okay, so I'll pause there for a moment, and you do have access to the chat log where you could see the prompt I used, how I pasted those objectives in there, and what the response was, and then how I took those out. Oh, good. I see the comment about excitement to try these prompts. Yeah, you have a lot of these here. I also need to, I didn't put it into the slides, unfortunately, but I will remind me, I'll take you to our GenAI resource page where we have tons of resources for you and examples and all of our prompts. Are all AI apps created equally? Good question. ChatGPT to me, and again, I'm using Plus. I'm paying $20 a month. I'll pause on this for a minute because I like to talk to people about that. Think about $20 and where you might spend $20 and how quickly $20 can be absorbed in other ways, resource-wise or whatever in your life, professional life. To me, $20 a month to have something that can empower your work forward so efficiently and effectively and save you so much time, it's really, to me, a no-brainer. But I can understand, you know, people have to think of their situations as far as spending money in different ways. I just think, you know, using something like ChatGPT 4 or Plus has so many powerful benefits to it. I haven't explored the other ones as deeply. I do follow the trends and the conversations out there, and I know what people are doing as far as with Bing and being able to do some of the same things. And of course, with Gemini coming out, and who knows what Apple has coming, who knows what Amazon has coming. So there's a lot on the horizon to track, obviously. Let's see. It was able to come up with those learning objectives just from that simple prompt and me putting the examples. Absolutely. And I can show you very quickly here. There's the prompt. So this is what you saw on the slide up to here. And then after the colon is what I copied and pasted as far as those objectives you saw on the earlier page. And then here's where it gave the objective and measurable outcome. I just grabbed the measurable outcome and used that as the outcome statement. And I could have finessed it a little bit more, and I'll show you how I do that related to rubrics, for example. Rubrics are really tricky to create in ChatGPT, but you can do it well with the right languaging. So you'll see that example. Okay, let me just do a quick chat check, time check, 40 after. Sandy, how do you source the information from AI? I'm not clear how to answer that. I need a little more clarification if you could. I'd be happy to respond. To access the chat logs, right there on the slides that you'll be receiving, you just click that URL and it'll show you a canned chat log that you'll have public access to. And there's the presentation. Great. Yeah, I would agree that ChatGPT 4 is still the best overall. You might use something like Cloud, CLAUDE. You might use that for analyzing documents. It was for a long time the best at, you could put in a 50-page document and have it give you a 2-page summary of the main points, outline of the main points, what have you. But GPT Plus has gone up to that level now. So that's where I tend to spend 90% of my effort is in GPT Plus, because it's nice to work within one system as much as possible, as you all know. Let me look at other messages here. Yeah, Bing does use ChatGPT 4 as its engine. Bing is just for people that are more familiar with using Bing in other ways. Obviously, GenAI is coming into Microsoft as Copilot. It's coming into all the Google apps as far as Google Drive. So you'll be able to start working more right within your workflow as things progress. So that's something to look for. Okay, let me jump us back, keep us going. There's a lot I want to share. Let's see, that jumped forward. You got to see these examples. You have the chat log. A little bit more on learning objectives is I always like to check in with the Bloom's levels. And this is a good job that Oregon State, their eCampus unit is phenomenal. They do great work and great research. So they created a quick little article on Bloom's levels and how GenAI stands up to that, and where GenAI will do things most effectively, and also how you can try to steer things more toward the student contribution and checking for that and leaning into that more. So this is just something to think about as you think of Bloom's. And I'll show you an example how I used ChatGPT to look at. So what I did here is I took another set of objectives, because I like to have different examples from different sources and disciplines. So I looked for Introduction to Psychology, which is maybe the most common course out there. And I actually got these six. I got these 6 from the American Psychological Association. These are the standard outcomes for Into the Psych courses that are endorsed by APA. So I said, okay, I'm going to grab these, and they didn't have them stacked up according to Bloom's taxonomy. So I was curious, and I thought, okay, let's look at that. And so I copied and pasted, and you'll see my prompt here, and a little bit of learning science, if you will, because I'm talking about Bloom's. That's talking about learning science. Also, I specified use the Anderson and Krathwohl version from 2001, because that's where they revised Bloom's taxonomy to what it is today. If you don't tell ChatGPT that, you'll get different versions at different times. You'll get outdated versions sometimes. So I gave it a little bit of that context about the learning objectives in the course, and then I gave it those bulleted statements, and it analyzed those, and it told me what level they were at. And it gave me some reasoning for that. And I didn't necessarily need the reasoning, but that's great to have, particularly if you're having a discussion in a department about course outcomes, program outcomes, things like that. So these are the different levels that I identified and justified here. Okay, and it gave me a little summary. Again, it'll often do that even if you didn't ask for it, which is nice to have. You can use it or not. Let me go back to the slide. And so the results it gave are remember, oops, let me back up. Remember, understand. And what was interesting is I looked at the APA website and I looked at the 5 objectives. They didn't have them identified by Bloom's level, and they actually had them out of order. And that's another thing to think about that maybe some of you are already doing, is as you work with instructors on their learning outcomes to improve them and to think about Bloom's, do you put them in order? So the learning outcomes that are at the base level of the pyramid should come first, because it's a progression usually. You want them to work at that base level and then be able to build upon that. And so I reordered the APA outcomes in this slide so that they are in the order of progression. So just kind of a side note FYI on that. Let me bring, I'll bring chat up because I actually need to put a link. Yeah, learning levels is extremely difficult because if the objectives aren't written effectively, then how can you think about the Bloom's levels? Yeah, and what's great about ChatGPT is you can have it, again, take a concept and you can have them move it up to a certain learning level or move it down to a certain level. And you can use Bloom's to do that or just some simple prompting language. So what I want to do is take a moment and get you involved in a little bit of sharing. And I'm going to do a copy and paste of the link that you're seeing. If you're using the QR code, great. I'm going to pause and then I'll take us to the Padlet and explain what we're going to do there. And I see we're at the halfway point on time. And we're just scratching the surface so far. We're going to get into content and activities and rubrics and all sorts of stuff. So if you haven't used Padlet before, you would click the plus key under that first prompt. And you can share ways you've used GenAI related to syllabus elements, welcome introduction, objectives, the things that I've talked about so far. And then we'll get to the other sections. And I've got a couple miscellaneous categories over there. Any other uses you've had or done that are worth mentioning. So I see people loading into the Padlet here, and you can see that populating toward the top. And I'll click refresh periodically and see what people are sharing. And I'm going to look at chat as well. Yeah, oh, that's a good point, Wendy. Thank you. I have in my prompts, when I'm telling it to give me instructions or goals for an assignment, for example, or if I'm telling it to give me learning outcomes, I have to remind it from time to time, understand is not a learning outcome. So that's one to look out for with ChatGPT. It still wants to say understand. Another thing is ChatGPT still wants to talk about learning styles, but learning styles have been debunked many times now. So you have to sometimes tell it, don't, cite learning styles, because people are different parts and multiple parts on a spectrum related to learning and learning preferences. And sometimes it's situational. So there's not a set learning style for a person. So just in short, that's another learning science nugget that I put into ChatGPT just to make sure that I'm not getting information that's not current or not scientifically accurate. So yes, thank you for bringing that up, Wendy. Okay, so let's look at column one, using it for descriptions. And that could be, again, course description. It could be module description. Let's get to that. It does amazing things for helping you to then do things at the modular level. We are going to get to that. And that's where it really starts to pay off for workload and distribution. Suggested outlines, draft overviews, great. Course objectives, outline and topic. Let's see. Okay, a lot of good uses. And then people are going into column two, which is just fine. I mean, I'm going to come back to that one after I talk about some examples for activity and assessment. So I'm not going to hold you back from going to that column, but I'm not going to go there right now for time purposes. We're going to go back to some examples together, and then we'll get in here and debrief a little bit. Okay. So let's get back into slideshow. And probably most of you have used Padlet before, I'm guessing. But the nice thing about Padlet is you'll be able to come back to that and have access to all of those ideas that are being shared across the group. That's why I often use Padlet. It's a good way to get information and sharing from the group that I can respond to, but also cross-group sharing that can be put out there and captured. Okay. So let's talk about setting expectations for students, going a little bit deeper onto that. So policy, as of summer, only 6% of institutions had an AI policy. And that's still a pretty low, number. I'd say about 1/4 to 1/3 have an AI policy. And that's okay, but there should be guidelines for sure to help for instructors and designers and students and staff in the way they might be using AI in their roles. But most institutions have been focusing on course level policies. And I took this from a colleague, Heather Brown, who I do some sessions with. She's at Tidewater Community College as an instructional designer. And she's also a co-moderator of this huge EDUCAUSE AI community of practice online, listserv, if you will. So these are the statements. What they do is they offer these three statements for their faculty, and this is in their syllabus builder that they have in Canvas. And so faculty will pick one of these three policies, and all I did was substitute Tidewater, and I put in the link to UMGC's policy, just as an example that might be more relatable. So these are the different levels. They can be broadly usable for students, but it still has to be within academic integrity, meaning they need to not represent others' work or GenAI's work as their own. They need to share how they used it and track that. And there are different ways that you can do that. And I've shared that in other presentations. I won't necessarily get to that today. But these are three examples of course policies. Another thing that instructors are doing, and this is something that I've adopted in the last week or so, is to provide an AI assessment scale or assignment scale. You can call it either. But if you want to, for an assignment, you can say this assignment is a level 5, it's full AI. Use it however you want to throughout the assignment to support your work. You don't have to specify which content is AI generated. You can make that judgment as the instructor if you want to for certain assignments. You can have it brought down level 4, level 3, where you have more of the student work and student ownership of what's developed, and or more of the tracking of where AI played a role. And some universities, I've seen an example where they'll have students go ahead and develop the resource, and as they're putting in references, they make sure that they list GenAI and how it was used throughout, or they make sure that the student will include the draft outline that GenAI created and their work on how they revised that and made it better and added their own input. So different levels that you can do. And I've got the reference here for the source for this. There's actually an article related to this, so you have access to that reference as well. And you could just copy and paste that and put into a Google search and find it. Okay, any questions or comments about course policy or the assignment scale? I mean, it's not where I intended to spend much time, but it's good information to give so that you can see those three examples of course policies, and you can see how at the assignment level, you can decide to put different levels of AI or no AI use, depending on your preferences, depending on the outcome, depending on the level of the course or the product that you're having students create. Great, thanks for the feedback in the chat there. And it is Creative Commons licensed. I've adapted a little bit to different language that I prefer. Again, you can see at the top, I put in Creative Companion because that's the term I like to use. You know, Microsoft uses Copilot. That's also a good term, but I like Creative Companion. I want instructors and others to think of it as non-threatening and not so technical and overwhelming, but it's your partner. Oh, absolutely, Deidre. Yeah. Easily adaptable to different contexts. Okay, so let's get to activities or assessments. This is where it gets, I think, really exciting. And this is where hopefully instructors get excited and designers get excited, because you can start putting in some of these prompts and just getting really rich results fairly quickly. So here's a prompt example. You're a very accomplished teacher of the college course. That's where you could put in the name of the course. You're excellent coming up with creative, engaging learning activities that are inclusive and motivating to students. Please provide 5 of your best ideas for an engaging learning activity focused on, and then whatever the course concept is. So this example, and I'll extend it further for Marketing 100. Let's look at an example here that I played around with. So here's the GPT log, which you'll have access to view, and you can see this was done in December. You're a very accomplished teacher, so there's that beginning prompt, and you can see that I'm now relating it to Marketing 100, Principles of Marketing. And then I want ChatGPT to provide 5 ideas for an engaging learning activity that focuses on different marketing strategies. So boom, here are the ChatGPT results. In a matter of, I'd say 30 seconds, this all rolled out. So it's giving a description of a title and a description for each of these. It's not a full-blown assignment yet. It's not something that you would just simply hand over to students, but we're going to go there in a minute. So I'm just going to scroll. I'm not going to read all of this, of course, but you can see in bold there the 5 different activity ideas. So my response, very intriguing examples. I'm most curious about trying the brand revitalization project. Let's have you focus on that with me. The project is completed in groups of 4. Create a student-focused assignment description, a few assignment objectives, guidance for what they should include in the project, how to divvy up the workload into roles, and what an effective presentation of their work could look like. That's a lot within just a few sentences there. So here are the results that came out. Again, 60 seconds or less. This is what I got for the brand revitalization project. Here's the overview. Here are the assignment objectives. It wrote those pretty well. I could easily work with those. And then here are the project components. So they would do the brand analysis. They would talk about do the revitalization strategy, then come up with a marketing campaign, and then a financial overview for how that's going to be enabled. What would it cost to make that take place? And then workload distributions. As you know, with group projects, it's very difficult to get people each playing an equitable role or contribution. So if you pin people to actual roles, you're more likely going to get that accountability. And those roles have purpose to the project. So they're not just generic. And then presentation guidelines. So 15 to 20 minute presentation, 5-minute Q&A discussion. Again, you can massage that. For these courses, if it's asynchronous, these can be recorded. You know, these could be research posters, different uses, different types of outputs that you can have. It's giving them some guidance or requirements, and then here are the evaluation criteria. Now, if I wanted to, I could push this down into a rubric. I'm not going to do it in this example, but I do have another one on that, and maybe more than one, because rubrics take a long time to develop, and that's why most instructors don't do it. Part could be maybe they don't have the right objectives up front. They may not understand how to then align those through the assignment and then how to put those into different levels and different point values. But ChatGPT, if you prompt it the right way, does it effectively. And then you massage that or refine that. Okay, any questions or comments? This is taking it, again, look at the original prompt here, just a couple sentences. And now getting some results and saying, okay, I like number 3, let's work with that. Here's what I want you to do. All of this, I think as I was preparing this, was probably 15 minutes for this whole process. So, okay, back into slides. Okay, so again, chat log there. Okay, so you're an expert in teaching, learning, and assessment. I'd like your professional guidance. For my Sociology 320, Sex and Gender and Contemporary Society, I want students to develop or to select a related topic, research it effectively, then construct and deliver an effective 7-minute oral presentation with an effective supporting slide deck. To help you with my context, here is the course description, paste that in. Okay, and again, you can put your own course title up there in that upper sentence as well and use the same prompt. I'm going to go to the chat log briefly, but then I'm going to go into live chat GPT, and you can see what that looks like. Okay, oops, that did not, there we go. Okay, so here's that same prompt. And then here's where I have pasted in the course description up to here. And then I extended that prompt, and that's why I want you to have access to the chat log. This wouldn't all fit on the slide. Now that you have context, I would like you to suggest a list of 15 to 20 sample topics. Then I want you to create a set of instructions to help guide students toward an effective presentation. Take into account the topic research they should conduct, how they should create an effective presentation, and how that can be delivered effectively. The entire assignment's worth 50 points, but I want you to break that down into 4 criteria. Quality of research, 15 points, coherence of verbal presentation. I don't want to read it all to you, but you can see everything that I've packed into the instructions there to now get a very detailed, rich response in just a moment. So put all of this into a table in the form of a rubric that can show students how they will be rated on each of these 4 criteria as either exceeds, meets, or needs improvement. Look forward to seeing what you create for me. Remember that the assignment can only be worth 50 points. Sometimes it pushes the points I found, so you need to kind of remind it. So here is the output. Let's begin by outlisting the 15 to 20 sample topics. Boom, here you go. You could look at these and decide if all or most of these are appropriate, copy and paste them, have them available for your students in Canvas for them to be able to select from. And it could be a pick list where once one is selected, it goes away. Or you might decide, no, people can choose freely. And if we end up with 5 people presenting on gender wage gap, then there are different ways that that'll be presented, different ways to approach that. So instructions for effective presentation. So here's for research and evidence and the 3 levels. So it did that well. And I'm going to scroll and tell you what happened that I didn't like and how I corrected that. So here's exceeds. I think that description is really effective. Meets expectations. Okay, that's right in the middle. And then needs improvement. It's going to tell you some of the things that do happen as far as visual preparation and delivery. And so students know ahead of time what you don't want so they can avoid that. So here's the rubric table. Now, friends, that is not a rubric, as most of you know, because it's not giving those descriptors. So that does not work. That does not add anything extra. So you can see my response here. I want you to combine the instructions for effective presentation into the rubric table where the point totals for each rubric table cell are listed parenthetically. And so you can see the response. And now it has nested those different descriptions here. Now, when I saw this 15 and 10 and 5 across the top, I panicked a little bit. I thought, no, they aren't all worth 15, 10, and 5. That's not going to add up to 50. That's going to add up to 60 in this column. But it did it correctly in the cells themselves. So as I export this table, I can simply take off these top parentheticals and everything else is accurate. Hopefully that's making sense. I know I'm covering a lot here, but there's a lot that's coming from this. So here's its response. It's, justifying what it's done. And I say, looking good. Now I would like a list of feedback comments that I can give to students based on different levels of performance across the 4 criteria. And I'm not suggesting that all of your feedback to students should be robotic and canned, but it takes off the workload because you know in each of those cells in the rubric what the common statements can be, and you can nuance those a little bit. And you can also, if you want to, give it an audio feedback to students. Or video feedback if some people are doing that. So here's a list of feedback comments for research and evidence. And you can see the prompting that I gave it, and I wanted varying levels of performance on the criteria, and I wanted positive and constructive statements. So here's positive comments for research and evidence, here's constructive, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this is creating a lot for instructors at a level they would most often not be able to get to because of time constraints, or in some cases, not having the background to get there and not seeing the ROI, the return on investment in time. Rubrics take time to do well, and that's time that people don't always have to invest to get to that point of the return. Okay, let's see. These are all great resources to help me as an instructor manage and grade student presentations. Grade 7 instructions. Now I want the instructions for the students. So here are the assignment instructions that they will actually be given. Select your topic, choose from that list that you saw earlier about conducting the research, about planning a presentation, designing your deck. They would get a copy of the rubric. I'm transparent. I give rubrics up front. I will even give examples of assignments up front. That's all part of UDL. It's not giving things away. It's helping students. Okay, and then key steps. Okay, any other comments about this one? I see a question I can't answer in there, so if anybody else wants to answer, Shanri, I'm not sure. Haven't had that experience myself. I would imagine referencing and citing it and being transparent that that's been used in the development of. Okay, so I'm going to go back into show here. And let's look at Padlet briefly, and I'm going to do a time check at the same time. And let me find chat.
Brett, you're doing good with time.
Okay.
You have about at least 20 more minutes.
You say that, I appreciate it, but you don't know what else I have planned.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
No, there's a lot, but I'll definitely be able to pick up pace if needed. So let's jump
Okay.
into the Padlet briefly. I appreciate the confidence. Any ways you've been using GenAI for activity or assessment design? So building pre and post tests based off instructional materials. Love it. You can give it big chunks of instructional materials and it will create quizzes and knowledge checks and do all sorts of great things. Incorporating learning theory into your assessments. Awesome. Yeah, if you can bring that into your prompting, it will bring that back out at you with the results. I hit refresh and I'll see if we get more comments. And that's fine if we don't get a lot of comments. I just wanted opportunity. And again, looking back at the beginning poll, many of you are newer or less frequent users. You're here today seeing some stuff that you can adopt and adapt. So that's what it's all about. You're all on the path. Okay, one more refresh. All right, let's jump back. It's all on me. Okay, so now let's talk about module lesson design. Powerful stuff. This is exciting to work with. So here's a prompt, Introduction to Psychology. I picked that again as one of the most popular courses out there, maybe the most popular, most enrolled course. I'm teaching a 14-week college-level Intro to Psych course. For this course, I'm using a learning management system. You could simply say Canvas, what have you, and want to have an online module for each week of the course. Suggest a 14-week module outline. You can also tell the textbook. I can say I'm using the OpenStax Psych 2E textbook, and it will know what to do. That's open access content. It'll have, you can give it that content, and it'll build things for you. I know you will create a great flow of module topics and respective module outcomes. So I'm again stating positive things, but reiterating this is what I want. They need to be specific and measurable. Remember, you are an expert in assessment and know and understand is not a measurable outcome. So you can see how I'm putting parameters on there for that. Module level outcomes is something that is very detailed, can be very granular, and a lot of instructors don't even approach that as a task. And it's a missed opportunity. And it's in my past in leading quality assurance efforts, it's where most people have failed, so to speak, if they're using Quality Matters to try and get their course certified. It's usually because they don't have, often because they don't have modular level outcomes, because it takes a lot of time to bring those bigger outcomes that might be too broad anyway down into these very fine outcomes. So let's go to the chat log and see how I'm getting some assistance from ChatGPT. So there's that prompt that you saw, and here's the result. Here's the 14-week module outline. Okay, I'm going to go quickly on that, but you can see that, okay, learning and conditioning. Actually, let me go back to sensation and perception because I'm going to go deep on that. So here are differentiate between sensation and perception, identify the major sensory systems, analyze the influence. Those are great guiding statements for students. So these are the 14 that it came up with. Boom, that's how quickly can you now start propping up modules with their titles and outcomes. That's just amazing. So great, I can work with that. I asked it for the 14 so I could copy and paste those into an external list. Anyway, let me go back, and I think what I'm going to do next is go into live chat GPT. So this is the resulting list. As you can see, I'm going to focus on sensation and perception. And then now here's the next prompt that I use. Okay, let's focus on module 4, because now I want to take that sweep of 14. I could start at number 1 if I wanted to, but for this example, I'm going to start with number 4. And you're aware that I'm using the OpenStax Psych 2E textbook and that students will be reading chapter 5 on this module topic. I want you to help me with additional experiences on the topic through the online module. Suggest a related video of approximately 10 minutes, because we know attention span drops precipitously after 6 to 9 minutes. So I just said 10 minutes. such as a TED Talk. I'm giving it ideas. TED Talks are great because they're high quality, they're captioned, and often there are instructional resources built around those TED Talks. So those are great to use. They're fairly current or very current in most cases. A research-based article, this is where it stumbles. I'll talk about that. I want an idea for an activity. I don't want just the typical discussion board experience. It's boring. I want you to create a question quiz, a check for understanding. So let me go live, escape here and go to, where do I have psychology? I'm going to go into that's sociology, that's bioethics. Where's my live ChatGPT? I've got so many tabs open. Okay, I'm just going to go here to ChatGPT. And now I've got it in a new tab. Okay, and these are all my conversations over here, all my prompts. And this is how it automatically words them, and it orders them by most recent on down, as most of you know. So I'm going to go to my example for Psych Course 14-week, and I'm going to scroll up to the top. There's a lot here. I'll go through it fairly quickly. There's the prompt that you can see. Great. Yeah, you'll have the video to come back to this and also the prompts in the slides. So here's the response. Absolutely. You saw this already. So I'm going to dive down to the next one that I was previewing, which is, okay, great. I can work with that. And here's what I want for my module. That's my prompt. Everything I showed you on that last slide. So certainly, it gave me a video recommendation. It's live linked. I was able to check it. Awesome. It gave me a description. I didn't even ask for a description of the video. Boom, that's going in my module. Online article recommendation. It gave me a link. I clicked it. Did not exist. So I went down. I looked at what else it created. Okay. Perception in action, virtual reality experience. I liked what it created, but right away, boom, I thought equity. Not all students have access to a headset, or I need to know, does the campus have a lab they can go to? It's giving alternative options, but for somebody to do a headset experience that's 100% like the best experience versus just going to a 360 video in YouTube or what have you isn't the same. So I would rethink this and make sure that students have access to that equipment somehow, reasonable access to make sure that there's equity for this experience. Here's the quiz with the answer key. Again, you as the content expert could review those questions. Great, let's make one change for the asynchronous online activity. I want the short video they create to be uploaded to a Flip video discussion community I've embedded in the module. So that's something I would do to get away from a text discussion. So absolutely, here's the revised asynchronous online activity. And it's changed the product, if you will, the submission by the students. Okay, great, but I just discovered the online article you recommended goes to a broken link. Suggest another. That one didn't work. Suggest another. That one didn't work. I'm like, okay, Google, I find an article myself. I had to do that 10% of the work. Life. So it doesn't do everything perfectly. It was hallucinating and suggesting articles that didn't exist. I know that now, and I will fill in that role where I need to. So I apologize for the oversight. Still didn't get a good result. And so I told it, I found an article I want you to use instead. So now it took my work and incorporated it into the output. So here's the revised comprehensive plan for module 4. And all linked, all ready to go. You can put these into the different module elements for the progression of students' experience through that module. And then there's that quiz that you can then put into the Canvas quiz, if you will. Let's see. Okay, now for the final touches, I want you to create a module overview description that gives students a sense of the topic in an engaging way. So I didn't ask for this, but it even threw in the little icons. So here's the module overview page. Many instructors don't provide any sort of context for a module. They tell students, dive in, read, do the activity or assessment, rinse, repeat. So dive deep with a TED Talk. Engage with a captivating article from Scientific American, experience the wonder of virtual reality, and finally test your knowledge. So that's doing a lot of great work the instructor doesn't have to create from scratch. So I said, that's great. One more task. I want you to provide an image related to the module topic. And I'm looking at this and I'm analyzing this. I'm looking for bias or stereotypes. And I'm thinking, this is pretty cool, these two images. I could go with either one of those, and you can see the download button. I can thumb up or thumb down if I have issues with it. And so it says, I provided these two images. Bonus, I was excited. Basically gave me the alt text, the alternative text. So if somebody is using screen reader technology, they would get that description of the image I have placed there. Love that. And I'm doing presentations on GenAI and enabling of UDL and accessibility. Okay, so nicely done. And I even praised it for that because I was so excited. And it praised me back. So one additional question, how long do you think it would take the typical student in this course to complete all of the elements of the module? That's important for students to know workload and for instructors to reflect on what they're asking the students to do. So for a 3-week course, the typical is, 3 hours of contact time times 3 for independent work, if you will. So 9 hours of online work that they might do. And that's for a traditional format course. So I'm having to analyze this, and it's giving me the results here, and I'm adding this up, and I'm saying, okay, what does this add up to? And it gave me the total, 6 hours to 11 hours. And again, that's going to depend on the student. And I thought, okay, the ballpark range was maybe 9 hours. And again, I think that's on the high end. And I thought, okay, that's right in the middle. So we're pretty good here as far as what's being expected for students. So that's good to have that ballpark. And so I'm leveraging GenAI to actually do the workload estimator as well. And there are workload estimators out there, but they're complicated online spreadsheets with all these cells. If you tell GenAI to analyze the resources, you can shortcut that pretty well. I played around with other things, giving me a mock-up of what this course would look like in a more visually oriented LMS. Anyway, let me go back. I don't want to digress too much. I have fun doing these things. And one of my colleagues who I present with a lot back in, I don't know, March, he's like, I don't feel like I'm working. This is fun. Like, wow, isn't that a dream to be able to say something like that? So let's go back into slideshow mode briefly. And I know we've got maybe 10 minutes max left here, and then I'll turn it back to Deidre. What am I trying to do? Slideshow. So here I just captured what was in ChatGPT. So you've got it in the slide. That's the module overview. Okay, for sensation and perception. Here's looking at what they would actually be accessing. So I put it into a slide view as well, if that's useful. And then here are the visuals. Okay, so what about an in-class lesson? I also told it for instructors that are teaching in person, how would you do something related to this? It gave great output. I had to nudge it a little bit, but it gave amazing output. And then I said, okay, now for a smart classroom, what might that look like where students are at pods and have access to the technology, and there's a monitor at each station where they can focus on their work, or it can be shared across students. There's some really great stuff in here. If that interests you, you can access the chat log. I love what it came up with. Let's see, reflections on using ChatGPT. So it's extremely efficient and mostly competent. So again, that 80 to 90% range that you can get it to pretty regularly if you're doing the right prompting. Not that hard to do. And so imagine the offload of work that it's providing and some of the things you've seen already. You need to coach it carefully. I've given you some examples there for outcome statements and other things. Watch out for hallucinations or dead links. So test stuff, validate it. Keep in mind inclusivity and watch for biases. People say AI is biased. Well, GenAI is a reflection of us and what we put into the LLM. So it's got our biases, and we need to watch for that, and we need to change those. So we can't always just pin it on AI. Leverage it to enable accessibility while you're doing your work. So think about any add-on little tasks you can have it do toward accessibility. And consider using it to maximize, consider plus is what I should say there. Well worth that $20 a month. And then you have access to plugins. There's other Gen AIs you can think about when you're ready. I'll go there briefly. Gamma is one for developing slide decks. So I can use ChatGPT to develop content and then use that and put that into Gamma to then rapidly produce. Gamma does its own generation. So you can go into Gamma just on its own and put in a prompt and have it create a slide deck for you. But I've been in the habit of using ChatGPT, and I like keeping my conversations or chat logs there. So I'll often do my prompting in ChatGPT and copy and paste that into Gamma and say, create a slide deck of this now. So let's see. I won't go to the outline results in ChatGPT because it's kind of what I've been doing. But then if you look at the slides that it's generated in Gamma, again, these were generated in a matter of seconds. And this is that same psychology chapter on sensation and perception. So I gave it my prompt and it gave me this slide deck. And there are preferences in Gamma where you can tell it to be more visual, less visual, how much text, what types of things you want to incorporate. There are themes you can select, or you can have it just do all the selection for you. So it's doing a pretty good chunking of content where I could run this lecture and I could embed some activities within there if I'm doing a live lecture, if I'm doing a lecture record, what have you. So this moves through it pretty quickly. You know, as the content expert, I would definitely want to go in there and make some changes. So yeah, Gamma is a really good one. For free, you can do one, but it's enough to experiment and see if it's worth it. So anyway, I would definitely suggest checking out Gamma. And then I'm going to get back to another tool here. A couple that I'm playing around, mostly HeyGen. This is where GenAI, you may have seen videos out there where it's creating these videos that are creepily realistic, very realistic, but still occasionally they'll have their flaws in them. And I have, you know, a stance on how much that should be used. You know, I think you can use it for short videos that maybe set up context for something. And what I did was I used HeyGen, and the link is there, and I can put it into chat for you if somebody doesn't beat me to it. But I'm trying to keep us on time. So HeyGen is where you can go in and you can actually, in HeyGen, it will record you. You can just speak randomly, or if you wanted to, you could have something that you read, but you want to have eye contact to the video, and you want to be speaking to the video because it's recording you and analyzing your voice and your visual, and then it's able to create videos of you speaking text that you give it. So you're no longer having to record each of the videos, you're just giving it the text that you want spoken. And you can use ChatGPT if you wanted to create the script. But like you saw earlier, some of those scripts, I could be taking the copy and paste of some of those scripts and putting it into HeyGen and having those videos created. So there are advantages, but you know, I'm not suggesting that people entirely AI themselves, avatar themselves, but it can be good for certain segmented videos that prop up something, like a welcome video. You might be able to do that effectively. So I played around with that a little bit, giving timely feedback. So these little feedback snippets you can feed into HeyGen if you had a full account, and it could give video feedback to students, which again adds a humanizing factor a little bit, even though it's AI, if that makes sense. For mini lectures, you can factor in visual rests and things like that if you're doing talks. So yeah, with marketing videos, that's where most of the work's being done. Obviously, there's a lot of power in using these for marketing and being able to really deploy effectively and efficiently, cost effectively, being able to really have a marketing presence and being able to respond to customers. Real estate is using these quite a bit to develop these virtual AI. You know, if you're working with a client and you know their desires as far as a property they're looking for, once a property comes up that meets those characteristics, you can have a GenAI video virtual tour created for them that, you know, gives them then the link to the property, and you can have that sort of interaction. So it'll do a lot of these automated email videos and marketing videos and things like that. Synthesia, I don't know as well, but a lot of people use that. Runway is like the really high-end level of creating these. HeyGen is the very user-friendly version of this. There's an article on this, you know, should instructional videos include a talking head? There's mixed results. It's how much talking head versus other content they're getting, or how much talking head at a time. I think it's good to intersperse talking head, but still have other visuals and other content that they're viewing, just to be able to mix it up and give different consumption points. Okay, so yeah, the results with the marketing videos, you know, Gary, I have to say, I don't know. I've heard, raves and things like that, but I haven't dug in to really authenticate if those are effective on the user side or on the company side. What ROI are they seeing? So, let's see, creating authentic learning scenarios. So authentic learning is really important so that students are getting a sense of the content and the knowledge that they're building, but also how they would be applying that. And it's motivational, and it's something that, again, leads to those workplace skills that they should have. I'm looking at time. Oh, I'm so close. Okay. So there's a chat log example for like case studies could be an example. Back in March, I was doing a presentation and somebody asked, I wasn't presenting on AI, but they asked about it. And I said, yeah, I'm playing around with it. And this is for a medical college. And I said, oh, let's look and see what it does for creating a nursing case story. And I did this live and everybody there was just kind of blown away on how effectively. So I ended up doing some more work with them, but it creates great case stories and case study examples if you give it prompts like this. So I'm not sure if any of you have been helping others with that. Here's just so another one that I'm looking at that's more recent is called Yo Scenario. So if you're wanting to do scenario experiences for students where they get a video on something, it's presenting a problem or a scenario to them, and they have to decide what should be done at this point. They pick A or B, it then branches them to the next segment, and then they get the end result based on those different decisions. And you can see the different pathways that are represented in the image on the left. There's one here, the Andy Dufresne case, which is about it's a do not resuscitate patient example, and what decisions would you make as the healthcare provider, what decisions or conversations would you have with the family, et cetera, power of attorney, all that stuff. So it's something like HeyGen and Yo Scenario, if those were together, where you can create these presentations that you've scripted that then could be these branching scenarios through Yo Scenario. I think I see a lot of power in these combined Gen AIs going forward. Right now, there's a lot of individual pieces, but I think more of these are going to stack together efficiently. Okay, let's skip Padlet for time purposes, and we didn't get a lot on that last one, that's fine. Non-instructional tasks, I'll just breeze by these and you can access them as you will. So a course wrap-up or feedback message to students, that's something that's a great way of closing out the learning experience, but a lot of instructors, their head goes to grading and winter break or summer break, can't blame them, but here's a prompt that I've created that does well, and an instructor could plop in the name of the course, 150 words. Here's an email they can send out to students. And again, they can do some tweaking to personalize it or change the language a little bit, but this will at least get them to take that step. And one that I love that sounds simple but is important is drafting a letter of recommendation. This is sort of an unsung task that instructors do. It's not often recognized, but it's time consuming. And certain times a year at end of terms, they get a lot of these, particularly if they are an advisor in a major. So I created this, and it's kind of spiraled into where I actually created the prompt. And instead of an email back and forth between the instructor, you as the instructor can give the student a link to this form. They can submit those elements, the questions, they can submit these elements that are then placed into this prompt. It gives a great letter of recommendation that is formally addressed and formatted and everything, where you review it and you look for accuracy, you look to make sure it represents the relationship you have with the student, their characteristics, their qualifications. Again, it does a lot. So there's a blog post, an article I wrote on that came out, I think, going into the holidays. So it's got all of this packaged together that you can access. Okay. Oh, love it, Christopher. Love seeing that. Series of emails. Yes. You can have it do your weekly module intro emails or wrap-up emails. Bumper videos are a great thing that I think it can do eventually. Tools to enable research and scholarship. That's another role for many faculty. Maybe not how you're engaging with them, but something to think about in their workflow. And Elicit is a good one. For some tasks, consensus, I mentioned Cite earlier. Research Rabbit's really interesting because visually it'll show you an article or a topic and all the other related clusters of topics, articles and authors and all sorts of things. Okay, so I know I'm at a hard stop here. I wanted to get to how we're actually putting all of this into these optimizers where instructors don't necessarily have to learn all of those things I talked about today. They can just go in and fill in these optimizer prompts. We'll have these available via freemium soon, so I'll share that out through Deidre and group, and that can be distributed. So we're trying to make it even easier where somebody can come in and just answer questions and within minutes have their resource.
Wow.
Yeah. So question, thoughts, or ideas? I guess we'll go to chat while I turn it back over. Yeah, go ahead, Deidre. It's all yours.
You know
you,
what,
everyone.
Brett? This has been truly amazing. Truly amazing. I mean, I know the chat is blowing up. We have so many. I hear a part two coming. Like we're gonna talk. I see it. I see it in the making. Um, Also, I just wanted to point out, thank you so much for sharing this. I know we could have this should be one of our deep dives, where we actually have a longer time to actually go deeper into these topics. I want to point out that we have learning circles, which is an opportunity for us in small cohorts to be able to practice some of these new technologies and topics that we're discovering and discussing in our virtual sessions. So please consider joining a learning circle. So we can actually practice this. Maybe we can have an opportunity to develop a lesson and use Chat GPT and HeyGen and all these new technologies that we're learning about, and learn about it together. So that's the purpose of the learning circles, is to actually practice these what we're learning. So thank you. I know we're out of time, and I hope that you are able to join us in our discussion on learning technologies, which we're going to talk about. You'll have an opportunity to discuss some of these that you've learned. So hopefully you'll join us for our discussion where we can actually go a little bit deeper into some of what you've learned. So thank you so much, Brett. I look forward to seeing all of you in a future webinar. Please tell others so that they can take advantage of this. And the recording will be available on the website fairly soon. I can't say exactly when, but we do our best to get it up and published as soon as we can. So thank you so much for your participation, and Brett, for you sharing all of these learning nuggets that we can't wait to put into practice immediately after this workshop.
Awesome. Bye. My pleasure. Enjoy your creative companion. Play. Do great work.
Thank you.
Many wonderful comments.